What makes a podcast or audio-related research study reputable? And when a study is reputable, how do we take the findings and apply them to our businesses or the industry on the whole? On today's episode, methodology.
Special thanks to our partners for making Sounds Profitable possible. Check them out by going to soundsprofitable.com and clicking on their logos in the articles.
Welcome to the Sounds Profitable podcast. I'm Arielle Nissenblatt. On the show today, we're talking about what goes into a research study. Specifically, we're talking about research collection methods and their implications. I've got Bryan Barletta and Tom Webster here to discuss. Tom recently wrote an article called How to Murder a Podcast, and then he put out a video on Sounds Profitable's YouTube channel called Research Collection Methods. By the way, you should subscribe to that YouTube channel. So far, these talking points may sound dry, but I promise you they are not. Tom, in one sentence, tell the listeners at home what they're going to want to stick around for in this chat.
The driest, most tedious podcast ever devised by humankind. And there's something in that, right? There's something in just kind of going for that. No, we're gonna have some fun because I think, you know, the reason why I wrote all that stuff is that I want people to make good decisions, because the better decisions that we all make in podcasting, the better podcasting becomes, and the more people listen to them, and then we all get to drive Bentleys and Maybachs or something.
Tom, I said one sentence. What the hell?
That was one sentence in Websterland.
And on my end, I really do want to highlight something. I think that research, I think the people that are super close to research find it less appealing to them to dig into, or think that people don't want to know about it. But the more time that I've spent with Tom, the team at Signal Hill, the team at Coleman, all these other amazing research in this space, I have so many questions for them. And when you get around a bunch of other people, they have questions too. So digging into research and what makes it valuable, I think is going to be really useful for our listeners.
We'll get to all of that and much more in just a few moments. But first, I would love to know how you two are. We must check in. We've heard from people that they love our dynamic, so let's give them more of the dynamic.
Well, it was at the time of recording, it was just Mother's Day here in the Hallmark celebration part of the globe. So that was a big part of this weekend for me, was making sure that my wife had a lovely day with her boys, and of course I took a big nap and watched sports ball. So it wasn't a bad day for Dad either.
We had a similar day at our time. No sports on our end, but making priority for Sierra this weekend. And she went to Austin with the kids on Saturday, and then yesterday we went lots of walks, lots of opportunity to go to bakeries and different cool places. Went to the library even. It was good. And it was a nice way to unwind, because the IAB upfronts were the previous week. This is a down week here. And then we're into London next week for the podcast show London and our Q2 event. And then it just bounces to almost every other week after that. I mean, we have a week off, and then in June, we're in both New York and Toronto. And it just keeps going until July. But yeah, it was a nice, relaxing weekend. The weather was warm and kind of rainy in San Antonio.
And I'm going to see you this week, Arielle.
Yeah.
I believe. I believe I'm going to see you this week, I think, in New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to the Webbies tonight, by the way. That'll be cool. And then I'll see you. When is it? Thursday night?
Thursday night. I'm giving a talk at a private club in New York, which I've been to a couple of times. Not because I'm an A-lister, but because I'm a C-lister with A-list friends.
That's right.
That's the way to be.
All right. Are you guys ready to get into it? Shall we?
Let's do it.
Let's dive in.
So Sounds Profitable, not necessarily a research company, but we do conduct research. Why and how do we do this? And how do we ensure that our studies are sound?
Well, I have a long career in doing research for podcasting, and the bulk of my career has been doing research that's been commissioned by somebody, right? And for the one thing about doing studies for people that commission research, often they will come to you with a theory or a story or something they hope to see. And the first thing I tell them is, you may not get that. Like, you may not, in fact, it may not give you what you are looking for, right? It may not, if you're looking to do research to prove some point you want to make, you can do that. It's a waste of money. But if you're looking to do research that actually expands your knowledge of the field and helps you make better decisions, then that's where I like to focus. But now with Sounds Profitable, I don't have to wait for anyone to commission a study about a given topic. We can all put our heads together and sort of look at the industry and say, if known, what set of facts would remove obstacles, remove barriers, increase audience, and increase the flow of money into this industry, advertising, sponsorship, or whatever. And so we get to do that, right? It's a great joy and it's a great privilege. So, in a way, I can do some of the most kind of unfettered work I've ever been able to do in my career, just for pure. There's kind of nothing cooler than unearthing a new fact that was never known before, and getting to do that is, it's I can geek out on that.
And that's, Tom, one of the things I want to dive into there. Like, research companies can do their own guided research, right? They can determine something is valuable and continue to do it. And I mean, we see a lot of great data out there from some of the bigger names in research, but when they have that product, when they do that thing that is consistent, that's theirs, that they're doing on their own, they also have to sell it. So if the data is like a nice insight and it's like hidden behind a paywall, well, then that's not going to be valuable. If it's something that they can show a little tease of and then give you a little bit more, when you log in, that is a product and all that. With us, like, when you do this research, when you do the quarterly research, our partners, the ones who specifically sponsored it, have added benefit of just a version with their own logo. But the truth is the same research goes out to the world, right? Like, we put that whole out there. We don't have to ask for payment. We don't have to ask for them to share their email or anything to get it. We just put the research out there to better the space.
Can I rant for just a second, Arielle? No. Okay.
Just kidding,
So
yes.
we have one yes and one no. Okay. When I was at Edison, the team behind Infinite Dial, we won a content marketing award for best use of original research at the Content Marketing Institute. It's a big thing at Content Marketing World. It was a nice feather in the cap for our team. And one of the main reasons for that is that we never put that research behind a registration gate. And it's something that drives me up a wall when it's something that will benefit the industry, that could certainly grow your company, but will help us all in the long run. When companies put it behind, some kind of lead magnet, I sign up for these things. I'm not a lead for them. I'm not a lead for those companies. I want to get the information. It just feels, ugh. Anyway, one of the reasons why Infinite Dial was as successful as it was is because we didn't make people jump through any hoops to get it. It was just out there. So that's the end of my rant.
Well, getting people to action on research is incredibly difficult too. Even people, when they pay for it, how do they use it? Do they put some of it in their own deck? Do they present the whole thing? Getting them to care and buy into it is tough. But then if somebody pitched me something and it referenced research from Sounds Profitable from someone else, and then I, as the person being pitched, went to go read that full report, and it was, hey, it's $6,000 for this report, I'd be out of there. If it was, hey, sign up, give us your email, and then we'll email it to you, I might be hesitant on it. It might slow down my desire to dive into it right then and there. And I think that that's really important, that these are sales enablement tools, right? Like, research in advertising, especially in podcasting, is to prove out this field works. You should spend more money here. And anything we do that kind of slows that process is a negative.
Going back just a minute, Bryan, you mentioned that it's hard to get people to take action on findings within studies. But one of the best examples of the past year is from the creators. Do you know which statistic I'm going to refer to?
Let's hear it.
It's the 70% of creators are men and only 30% are women. I have heard and seen that referenced throughout decks, and people that don't know that I have an association with Sounds Profitable will say that back to me, and I'm like, yeah, that's from the creators. What are you going to do about it? And a lot of people are doing things about it. It's really cool.
I think that's the interesting part, is that the more research you put out, the further it's been away from it, and the more valuable points you have, the more you hear it come up later, right? Like, when we release a research report, that might not be when people are ready to hear it. That might not be when people are ready to update their decks or action on it or anything like that. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to be comfortable with the fact that just because it released today doesn't mean that tomorrow people are going to start talking about it. It might be 6 months. It might be 9 months. It might take a while for that to really sink in or be usable.
There's two things about research that are really important and meaningful to me. One is that it can help to develop a market, right? And that was part of my goal way back in 2005, 2006, when I campaigned to get podcasting added to the Infinite Dial in the first place. And we started doing this kind of research, was that I believed in the concept, I believed in the medium, and there was not going to be a market for it unless it was measurable to people. And that just the very act of measuring it makes it, gives it a kind of justification and it makes it matter, I think. The other thing is in just what you talked about, Arielle, with that stat, which is, it's kind of an incredible stat. And, the one thing that as a statistician, is that when you have a bias in a system, when you have an unequal system in the first place, like that gender bias you talked about with creators, that being fair after that will never fix that system. Being equal after that will never fix that system, right? If I have $1 and you have 50 cents and I say, all right, from now on, we're splitting everything, I will still always have more money than you. So being equal does not fix a bias system. Being equitable does, and that requires good measurement, and that requires something you can rely on that tells you, all right, this system has a problem. We need to be proactive to fix it.
And for those keeping score at home, Tom just said some really great soundbitey things that I imagine will be in an audiogram later. We love to be transparent here.
Boom.
Boom. I want to talk about data collection methods. And what's interesting is this is something that I got from your YouTube video. What's interesting about this is what I'm about to say might sound obvious. It's clear that there are different ways to collect data and that these are going to be the ways to collect data, but to have them laid out for you is actually really helpful. So there's probability surveys, convenience sampling, and then there's a special third way called CRAP. Let's get into them. What is probability surveys?
Yeah, so a probability survey is basically what defines a probability survey is that it is representative of the population that it purports to represent, and the way that it becomes that, and this is a little bit of a geeky definition, but I hope it's pretty easy to get, is that anybody in that particular population has an equal non-zero chance of being selected to take the survey. That's it, an equal non-zero chance. And so with a lot of the online research we do, we work with panels that are themselves designed to be representative of the U.S. population. They're scientifically designed to be that way. And when we field something to that panel, everybody in that panel has an equal non-zero chance of being selected. So you can say that this study represents Americans 18 plus, right? Because you know that you have information on who did and didn't take the survey, right? That's a probability sample. And anytime most of the problems I see with surveys are when people take what is actually a convenience sample, which is I'll get to in a second, and extrapolate that to a population when that's not the correct thing to do. A convenience sample is, a survey of your clients, a survey of the people who subscribe to your newsletter. When you're asking people to self-select into a survey, it's not representative of a population. It may not even be representative of your customers. It's just the people who happen to take the survey. That doesn't mean it's crap. It just means that it needs to be described correctly. So, if you're a marketing company and you send out, an email to your clients and you say, take the survey, and a couple hundred take it, it's fine to say, we surveyed our customer database and 200 people said this. It's not fine to say, marketers believe this. Right, because you didn't survey all of marketers, and you don't know the non-response bias, we call it, of the people who didn't take the survey. But I can still work with that data as long as I know where it came from. And to me, the test of a survey is, can I simply describe who took it, or does it become really complicated?
When you say you can still work with it, how's that split? Right, let's say between the two, right? Can you give me an example of how you would use one versus the other? Like the same question, but like a different audience answering it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, no piece of research gives you the ultimate truth, right? The truth about a thing is unknowable. What you can do is you can triangulate with various things, right? So if I look at a study that, let's say, a hosting company put out to their customers. Now, their customers are creators. Their customers are podcasters. And I can look at the differences between Libsyn putting out a survey to their customers and Art19 putting out a survey to their customers. They're going to come back with very different results because they have different customer bases. And because I know a little bit about the customer bases for those two companies, I can contextualize what I get back. I know that neither one is the whole truth, but both of them are a piece of the truth for a piece of the puzzle. And it's the skill of people in customer insights and audience growth and things like that to put those pieces of the puzzle together. But they're not, but they're valuable pieces. They're just not the whole truth.
And what's a crap study? And I think I know what a crap study is I think I know what a crap way of collecting research is because we see them all the time on social media. But let's give an example.
Yeah, I mean, a crap study is one that you can't, it's not a probability study. It is by definition a convenience study, but there's no frame around who you actually talk to, right? So in the previous examples that I gave, if a hosting company surveys their customers, I know it's a self-selected study, but it's a study of customers of that particular company, right? If I put a poll up on Twitter and I say, how many podcasts do you listen to each week? And I get 300 people say they listen to, 10 or more or whatever. I can't easily describe that sample. I can't say Twitter users because I didn't reach all Twitter users, right? I can't say podcast listeners because I don't know who answered it.
You
I
cannot
can't say
extrapolate
anything.
that data.
No, you can't. It's because it is idiosyncratic to the people that follow me on Twitter, right? And I can't simply describe that. So if I can't simply state who was surveyed and who was not surveyed, regardless of the method, then I can't do anything with it.
You could say, of the people that saw my tweet at the time between this time and this time, this is the outcome, and chose to respond, right?
Yeah, you could do that. But like at that point, why are you doing it?
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it? You're doing it for content marketing purposes,
Exactly.
maybe. You're doing it, but you're not doing it to gain insight. You can't.
Hopefully you're not using that for anything except for it's fun. It was a tweet that was fun. I mean,
Yeah.
There was a tweet that went viral over the weekend that said, I'm at a wedding with my friends. I forget who posted this. I'll put it in the show notes. Do you know what I'm going to say, Brian?
I do.
You're nodding your head.
I do.
At a wedding with my friends, and we're having a debate who was more attractive when they were younger, Al Pacino or who was it? Robert De Niro. And hundreds of thousands of people voted, and when it ended, 50-50 split. Exactly 50-50 split. Isn't that fascinating?
I think that's probably the right result, right?
But
I don't know. I think that's probably the right result.
I like hearing that there is actually, because look, the first two, as you were going through it, I was like, oh man, how do we get to this junk one? How do we get to one where it's not valuable? And really what it is it's valuable as long as you disclose how you collected it. But at a certain point, when that sentence of how Arielle explained that she was collecting that exact Twitter one, if I read that as somebody showed me the data, I would click next. I would reconsider reading the rest of the report, but I definitely wouldn't ingest in any of that data. It would be very, very like jury strict this from the record type of thing, because you're looking at it and you know it's crap because they said it on the label, but whatever reason they wanted to show a point. But that's really good that we can corner that out there. It's easy to not do crap then, because if you can't explain who that audience is, right, Tom? Like you can just not do it, right? If you can't really define that audience of who did and didn't take it, you can just choose not to spend the money on it.
Yeah, well, hopefully none of that kind of work actually costs money. I think people do those kinds of polls because they don't want to spend money because, they are free and they are full value.
When we have a crap study, what is at risk when the collection methods are crap, when they're less than ideal? And how can the final outcome manipulate readers of the study or people who take in that data? And I think that puts the onus on the people who are reading it. But I mean, there's a certain element of education that needs to be put forth. If we can educate people as to how to find out how the surveys were collected or how the study was collected so that we can figure out how to actually read it, that would be a great way to combat misinformation or information that's just not, being collected in the right ways. But what is at risk? How can the final outcome manipulate readers, and how can readers fight against that?
Well, there's two dangers here. There are sins of omission and sins of commission, right? The sins of commission are when you do something that you probably shouldn't have done. And you and I, all three of us probably know people on Twitter that are really into crypto and really into NFTs and things like that, right?
Just kidding.
And I know people on Twitter that will put up polls all the time talking about how excited they are about NFTs, or do you own any Ethereum, or and they'll put up a poll like that says 90% of people are optimistic about Ethereum or Crapcoin or whatever it is that they're pushing. And of course, that is completely symptomatic of who is following them, because they are crypto people, right? And so they put this out there, and if you see that and you make a bad decision, and you make a bad investment in something because you saw some crap piece of data like that, then that's a sin of commission. But more sinister than that in some ways is the sin of omission. And that was kind of what was behind my How to Murder a Podcast article. And that's when you don't do something because a piece of research warns you away from it, and maybe you should have done it, right? And the thing is that when you do research about what people like in terms of content and what they like, they're able to tell you that they like the things that they know. They like things that they're familiar with. They don't have the vocabulary to tell you that they like things they don't know, right? It's very difficult to do that. Like something that's unfamiliar to them, it's hard to gauge, it's hard to judge. And so when you get a piece of data back that says, a lot of people don't, they don't want to hear a podcast about this. Well, are you sure about that? Because maybe they just haven't heard a good podcast about that. Maybe they don't have a positive frame of reference for it. And that's the art that goes into it, because any kind of research like this is art and science.
Bryan, I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
It's a softball. Why did Sounds Profitable feel like it was important to set the record straight on research collection methods? I ask this because I know that education is a really big pillar of this company, and I want to know what lesson you're offering here. And do you feel like you did a good job with that lesson?
Well, I mean, this is backseat commentary because it was all Tom. But I will say that I'm really proud of us choosing to do that. I think it's not easy to point at other research out there because we're a very small space. I mean, we didn't hit $2 billion in podcasting as of the IAB report, so we're even smaller than we were hoping for. Yeah, right. And granted, that's US, and I think things are growing overall, and we are consistently the largest growing channel. But anytime there's any research out there that's from a big name, slowing down any momentum, asking people to question it, it takes away from that. So we had to make sure that was the right call there to highlight all these different collection methods, highlight all the different content we wanted to put out about this. But the reason Tom and I started working together is we wanted to educate everybody. I think that there was a time when, even a year ago, when Tom and I started working on this together, where I think we stood out a little bit more as individuals with knowledge and education about this space. And I think we worked very hard to bring everybody up and educate them more. And now the next part of this is saying hey, not everything from every source that you believe in, that you built everything around, is actually 100% accurate. I don't think there's any actors in podcasting today of note misleading anybody. I really believe that. With data, with outspoken on that, I think that gets burned down real quick. I don't think we have a tolerance to that. But I do think that today we have to start looking at the data and looking at how people are using the data a little bit more closely. And the best thing that Sounds Profitable can do is point it out when we feel we need to and educate people on how to do that. So I'm glad we did it. I hope we can do it less and less. I hope we can do it through partnership and collaboration with more people to help them with their research, because that's really what we want to do. We're going to put out considerable amounts of research. We don't consider ourselves a research company because the growth of that is going to be aggregating other people's research, aggregating other people's data, answering the questions that we believe drive the industry forward. But there are other companies out there that are doing really valuable things that we want to collaborate with, work with, and hoist up, because we don't want to get into those spaces. They're a lot of work, and I think we can do better on the very specifics.
Tom, in the article you wrote called How to Murder a Podcast, which, first of all, love the titling, there's a section called Why I Made This Into a Thing. So I think it's pretty clear why you made this into a thing, but more importantly, what would happen if you didn't make it into a thing? What's at risk if people don't understand research collection methods?
Well, in that article, I think I was responding to some data that was put out about kind of the most, currently the most successful kinds of podcasts in terms of how many are out there versus how many of them are, make the top 200 or something. And my concern with that is that, we still have not really reached 2/3 of the country in terms of being regular listeners. We, about 1/3 of the country are regular listeners to podcasts. So any list like that is, just like any investment company tells you, past performance is not indicative of future returns. And that particular list, I think, showed true crime as kind of the most successful. But, I kind of have a saying about that. Does the system dictate the inventory, or does the inventory dictate the system? And in that particular case, I think true crime grew out of Serial, right? Serial was a big hit, and that became something that a lot of people copied. And a lot of people started to listen to that because it's just, it's the category that kind of bubbled up in one of the surges in podcasting. Doesn't mean it's the only option. I think more people are interested in music-related content than in true crime-related content. So, what I wanted to be sure did not happen would be that somebody would look at that list and say, well, you know what? Podcasts about educational topics are not very successful, so I'm not going to do it. Or, yeah, you know what? I wasn't sure about what to do my podcast on, but I'm going to do true crime because that's really popular. Both of those would be...
Hopefully you don't do a podcast unless you have an idea for a podcast.
Let's hope. Yeah. Let's hope. And, as Stephen Sondheim said in Sunday in the Park with George, and I know we're all big Broadway musical fans here at the Sounds Profitable
Huge.
Podcast. Yeah, anything you do, let it come from you, and then it will be new. And so I wouldn't want to see people make bad decisions on genres and topics of their podcast based on past performance, because we're nowhere near there yet on podcasting.
Awesome. I think that's where we will leave it for today's discussion. Thank you, Tom and Bryan, for sharing your insights into research and collection methods. What's next for Sounds Profitable's research? We are going to be in London, and we're going to be sharing some research. Can you give us a sneak peek? For folks who don't know and are Sounds Profitable partners, they can see this research presented live, right?
That is correct. So our Q2 study for this year is about buyer perceptions and how buyers, agencies, brands, holding companies perceive podcasting, why they buy it, why they don't buy it, why they don't buy as much as they could or perhaps should. And we're going to be giving a preview of that live to partners at the podcast show in London, with a full release of the report coming probably towards the end of June. So people who attend our partner-only event at the podcast show will get to see kind of a sneak preview of it. We looked at a lot of the perceptions and biases of podcasting and measurement, how easy or difficult it is to buy podcasts. And we'll have a sneak peek of all of that in, 1 week's time from when we're recording this.
If you are a partner and you don't know what Tom is talking about, feel free to get in touch. We're going to share our email addresses in just a moment. And if you are not a partner, but you would like to be a partner, you can also get in touch via the emails that we're about to share. Let's do that now. Tom is at tom@soundsprofitable.com. Bryan at soundsprofitable.com. Of course, if you want to reach the podcast, it's podcast@soundsprofitable.com. And we're also on Twitter. I'm at Ari this and that. Bryan is at Bryan Barletta. Tom is at Webby2001. And of course, Sounds Profitable is at SoundsProf News. We're also on LinkedIn, but that's a lot of places for you to potentially find us. So just find us. We would love that. Listeners, what are you interested in learning about the wider listening or creator public when it comes to audio? What studies should we source? Let us know.
If you want, and then we have the email. Okay, yeah, so there we go. To access our articles, product deep dives, the Podscape, our research, and more, head to soundsprofitable.com.
You can also leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. I mean, you can review us on Yelp too, but no one will read that. We're currently at a 4.4 rating, and it would be cool to see that tick up a little bit, because I like numbers. We'll report back here next episode with any changes to that, and you can be a part of that change.
And shout out to our reviews on Spotify too. I appreciate that. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sounds Profitable Podcast with me, Bryan Barletta.
Me, Tom Webster.
And me, Arielle Nissenblatt.
This episode is put together using Spooler, edited by Gavin Gaddis, and hosted on Art19.